friends. It is our great pleasure to have you here today in the new academic year, 2020-2021, in such an uncertain time. The world is going through the effect of COVID-19 pandemic. Anyhow, I would like to refer to some points of having our session titled Current Trends in Pragmatics. The first is that the co-current research is interdisciplinary, integrating two fields to come up with results that solve problems. As such, pragmatics could be tackled with a variety of disciplines. The other goal is that this session is a departure point to practice this interdisciplinary approach in our sphere of search, which is a vital point urgently needed. Before coming close to these marks, Assistant Professor Dr. Marwan Najib starts with a brief background on pragmatics. In her lens, Assistant Professor Dr. Ida Muzaffar views Grice's maxims from a new perspective. As for Assistant Professor Dr. Wafa Muzaffar Ali, she was supposed to be here to show how the pragmatic approach could be applicable in discourse analysis, but because of certain circumstances which stood in her way, she could not attend. Another up-to-date view on onomatopoeia and pragmatics is to be presented by lecturer Dr. Huda Al-Halawchi. Last but not least, Professor Dr. Bassem Yahya, who never stops taking his audience to the scene of crime, the court, and other forensic issues in a linguistic matter. We end this session with recommendations that have to find their place in practice. I sincerely hope you will enjoy today's session. And now we will start with a historical background of pragmatics, presented by Assistant Professor Dr. Marwan Najib Tawfiq, who has an MA in Pragmatics in the year 1994, a PhD in Pragmatics also in the year 2005. His special interests are in relevance theory and speech acts. I have to add something here. If Dr. Marwan taught you Pragmatics during your BA or MA study, then you're under the Marwanian spell. Go ahead, Doctor. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Dunya, for this nice introduction about pragmatics and about myself. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Before I start talking about pragmatics, I have to make a note on the term itself. We have to distinguish between two terms, pragmatics and pragmatism, because I know that there is much confusion that happens between these two terms. So many people do not know the difference, and so many people use these two terms interchangeably. They are totally different from each other. Pragmatism is a philosophical study which started in the mid-19th century by three people without knowing, each one of them, without knowing that the other people are developing something about pragmatism. These three people are William James, the philosopher, and Peirce, and John Dewey. Now, the three people were talking about probably the same point or similar points in pragmatism, but what made a serious prospect probably to pragmatics was Charles Peirce. Peirce in 1860 developed pragmatism to semiotics, in which he talked about three categories: the sign, its subject, and its interpretants. This continued until try to pay attention to the date, because I'm talking about the beginning. I'm talking about the end of the 19th century and towards the beginning of the 20th century. Now, in this period, the ideas of Ferdinand de Saussure appeared. Ferdinand de Saussure also talked about something about the sign, linguistic sign, non-linguistic sign. And probably he was very much inspired by Charles Peirce's ideas. Until the 1938, a book appeared by Morris entitled Foundation of the Theory of Signs. Now, everybody who is specialized in pragmatics probably know this, this book, because it is, so many people believe that this is the birth date of pragmatics. So many people believe that this is the birth date of pragmatics and semiotics. Morris talked about three components of language. Syntactics, at that time, he didn't call it syntax, he called it syntactics, semantics, and pragmatics. Syntactics, according to Morris, okay, I'm talking about 1938, syntactics is the study of the relation between each sign and the other signs in the same line. Semantics studies the relation between the sign and the object to which the sign is applicable. And in pragmatics, he was talking about the relation between sign and the interpreters of the sign. Now, when we talk about the interpreters, of course, here we mean the speaker and the hearer or the users of the sign. That was the shape of or the map of linguistics until 1983. Now, you know, in the 50s of the 20th century, structuralism appeared, but together with structuralism, nobody was paying attention to the schools of philosophy, which were flourishing at that time. Now, we have two famous schools of thought at that time. I'm talking about between 40s and the 50s of the 20th century: ideal school of philosophy and ordinary school of philosophy. The ideal school of philosophy was originated by the philosophers Gottlob Frege, Alfred Tarski, and Bertrand Russell. This school tries to study the logical system of artificial intelligence, which consequently turns into the development of formal semantics, the abstract symbolic interpretation of language with formation of rules, developed later by their followers such as Richard Montag, David Donaldson, and David Lewis. The other school of philosophy, the ordinary school of philosophy, on the other hand, flourished at Oxford in the 1950s by John Austin, who gives attention on natural language rather than the abstract symbolic form. Later, John Austin himself and his student, so many people do not know that his student is H.B. Grice. Grice was a student of Austin, developed the theory of speech acts, both of them together, and the theory of conversational implicature. So many people know that conversational implicature goes to Grice and the speech acts to Austin, okay? Other famous followers, as well as philosophers of language of this school, are Peter Strawson, John Searle, Ludwig Wittgenstein, and probably even Recanati, who appeared, his publications appeared in 2004. In their approaches to language study, they were profoundly interested in eliciting various aspects of language like meaning, form, and origin, from the mystery of symbolic logic to the straightforward scientific observation of analysis. Then, so many people were talking at that time also about pragmatics as a wastebasket. Now, so many people do not know where this term came from. It came from, surprisingly, from Bar Hillel. Bar Hillel is the teacher of Noam Chomsky, but he didn't talk when he said that when he used the term wastebasket, he didn't mean pragmatics. He shot this term for semantics. For Bar Hillel, semantics was the wastebasket of syntax. Later on, so many people used this term in order to denote that pragmatics is the wastebasket of semantics. Then later, so many people believed that Pragmatics was the wastebasket of all the levels of language. In 1983, a turning point happened at this year, because in the same year, two famous books of pragmatics appeared. The first one was Principles of Pragmatics by Jeffrey Leach, and the other one was a book entitled simply Pragmatics by John Levinson. Now, these two people were talking in the same year. This might be a coincidence. In the same year, they were talking about pragmatics, all in their own. Levinson was providing his own perspective on pragmatics, and Levinson was providing his own view of pragmatics. Now, in these two books, they were trying their best in order to find principles of pragmatics or rules of pragmatics, and they dedicated a lot of their books in order to differentiate between semantics and pragmatics, because, you know, everybody was introducing pragmatics as another study of meaning, a different study of meaning, different from semantics. So the basic goal was differentiating between semantics and pragmatics. Now, in this concern, we can say that according, for example, to Levinson, semantics is concerned with those elements of meaning that can be directly decoded from the words of sentence itself, and pragmatics is concerned with these elements of meaning that depend on contextual information beyond the words of sentence itself and on the interpreter's inferential ability. According to Leach, semantics deals with the literal meaning of words and the meaning of the way they are combined, which taken together from the core of meaning, or the starting point from which the whole meaning of a particular utterance is constructed. Pragmatics deals with the ways in which literal meaning must be refined, enriched, or extended to arrive at an understanding of what a speaker meant in uttering a particular expression. Everybody who reads about pragmatics is fronted with different views of pragmatics. Even the introduction provided by Ms. Dunya at the beginning of this symposium or workshop, she was talking about pragmatics in a certain way, which reflects only one view, actually, of pragmatics, which is the interdisciplinary view, that pragmatics should be dealt with other disciplines. In fact, we have three views of pragmatics. The first view is the componential view. Or sometimes called the Anglo-American pragmatic thought. These schools are of different ideologies. The Anglo-American school deals with the systematic study of the meaning of language along with the contextual meaning variations. The main topics of investigation of this school includes deixis, presupposition, conversational implicature, speech act theory, etc., as most of the contemporary books of pragmatics incorporates nowadays. Among all the aforesaid pragmatic terms and theories, since speech acts probably takes a very big place in this view. Anglo-American pragmatic school is also regarded as component view, and that's why sometimes it is called the componential view. Now, you all know that we have different components of language, different levels of language, starting from phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics. Now, so many people believe that this view is taking pragmatics to be the new component of language, the new component of linguistics, which completes the job of the other levels. That's why it is sometimes called the componential view, or sometimes it's called the complementary or the complementarist view. Since the proponents of this approach affirm that, like phonetics, phonology, syntax, and semantics, pragmatics should be treated as the core component of language investigation. The title of the school indicates its origin and development under the tradition of Anglo-American linguistic philosophy, but nowadays this approach of linguistic interpretation is very popular throughout the world. So it's not only in the two, continents, but it is also in so many places. The other school is called the European view, or sometimes it is called the continental view, or sometimes it is called the perspective view. The European or continental pragmatic thought, on the other hand, incorporates a broader aspect of linguistic pragmatic investigation, which also includes the topics of sociolinguistics, psycholinguistics, and discourse analysis. Now, this is what we called the interdisciplinary view. This school termed occasionally as pragmalinguistics sometimes, okay, which is a theory of linguistic communication. It mainly explains the way of influence of communication through their verbal message. Supporting this statement of this school can also be regarded as perspective view of pragmatics, as it represents a functional perspective of every aspect of language behavior. Now, I'd like you to link this with what we talked about when we mentioned the three definitions provided by Morris about semiotics. Morris' view of semiotic pragmatics, considering the study of a huge range of psychological and sociological phenomena involved in the science system, pointed out in the earlier section, is very similar to this tradition of pragmatic interpretation. This is according to Levinson. So Levinson believes that this view is very much linked to Morris' understanding of the school. Now, I said at the beginning that we have three views. Now, we mentioned now two views. So either you put pragmatics as a component of linguistics, in which case you are dealing with the Anglo-American pragmatics, or the Anglo-American view, or you talk about the European continental view of a pragmatics. In this case, you are in the second view. Now, what is the third view? Now, the third view, I didn't find it in any book. Actually, I didn't find it in the books of pragmatics. But the problem is, I can see this view in so many research works, although the people who are following it are not saying it, but in fact, they are doing this in their analysis, in their pragmatic analysis. They are trying to find a kind of a bond between pragmatics and every level of linguistics. So if you want to study, for example, syntax, you can study syntax in relation to pragmatics. Or if you want to study morphology, you study morphology in relation to pragmatics. So it is a complementarist view, but not in the sense that it completes the job of all the components in general. No, but it completes the job of every level by itself. So in this way, you can see that there are so many works, so many studies in the world talking about a phonopragmatic study, or a syntactic pragmatic study, or a morpho-pragmatic study. So this is a new, probably, a view for pragmatics in which we are seeing a complementarist view, but within every level by itself. I tried this probably in my research works, and long ago, I tried to prove that sometimes pragmatics solves problems, many problems of syntax, and some people are trying to do this in phonology also. I saw this in the readings that I made about pragmatics in the recent years. So this can be a kind of a perspective, a way of looking at pragmatics in which you link the two views together in one view. So it is not a complementarist view in the orthodox meaning of complementarist, and it's not also a European view 100%, but it tries to link the two together, making a new view. I stress that I found this, but I couldn't read it in any book. I couldn't find it in any source of pragmatics. This is the way pragmatics is working now, but I can assume that my colleagues are going to show to you that they are going to describe to you how pragmatics can work better with other disciplines of language study. Thank you very much. I assume that we are going to have questions and probably discussion at the end of the symposium, not at the end of every contribution. Right, Ms. Dunya?
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Marwan, for this fruitful background on pragmatics. Now we have Grice's Magazine, a new perspective presented by Assistant Professor Dr. Ibab Mudaffar, who has taken an MA in pragmatics in the year 1999, a PhD in pragmatics also in the year 2004. Her research interest includes politeness, impoliteness, discourse strategies, and speech acts. Okay, Dr. Ibab, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dunya.
You're welcome.
For giving me the chance to talk about Grice's Maxims, a new perspective. As social creatures, people interact or communicate with one another in the form of conversation. As we know, conversation aims to keep the good social interaction among them. Besides giving or getting information, the conversation occurs to show the existence of the human in its surroundings. In conducting the good conversation, the participants involved, I mean in this case the locutor and the interlocutor, should be active in the interaction. If one of them is not active, it can be predicted that the dialogue cannot run well. So in order the communications process between speaker and hearer becomes smooth and effective, both of them have to be cooperative, which means that they have to understand mutually what they are talking about in the conversation. In linguistics, especially in the pragmatic field, there is a theory that explains how people can be cooperative in the conversation. Just tell me if the PowerPoint slide is working, Ms. Dunya.
Actually, it's not working.
It's not working?
No, I was wondering why you're not there, Ms. Huda. Excuse me, Ms. Huda.
Just a minute, please.
Yeah, Ms. Dunya. Doctor, just press presenting.
Okay, I'll manage it, inshallah.
Share.
Just a minute, please.
Right.
Even if you repeat the whole thing, it's okay.
Okay.
It was funny because I was wondering why weren't you on the screen or the PowerPoint?
Here it is.
Okay. I think it's coming out. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Start again.
Yeah,
Grice's Magazine with a new perspective. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Dunya. Okay, so I was saying that in linguistics, especially in the pragmatic field, there is a theory that explains how people can be cooperative in the conversation. It is a cooperative principle. This theory is a principle of conversation. According to, it was introduced by the American philosopher Paul Grice in 1975. According to the cooperative principle, participants in a conversation normally attempt to be informative, truthful, relevant, and clear, which means that each participant is expected to give contributions in the conversation as is required. Accordingly, Bryce presents 4 conversational maxims to illustrate how we communicate effectively in the light of certain rules. The important thing to say here is that the proposed maxims are not a set of rules that should be followed to the letter. Rather, they are to be followed to the best of the speaker's ability, and thus can be creatively broken or conflict with one another sometimes. The 4 maxims are stated in the following points. Number 1, the maxim of quantity. This maxim demands the speaker to provide the right amount of information through speaking process. It consists of 2 sub-maxims. 1, make your contribution as informative as is required. And second, do not make your contribution more informative than is required. So it's about the quantity, the amount of information. The second one, the maxim of quality. This maxim requires the speaker to supply the right information through speaking. Grice shows it in the sense of telling the truth as a super maxim. Try to make your contribution one that's true. So this is the super maxim. This super maxim includes 2 sub-maxims. 1, do not say what you believe to be false. And 2, do not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. The third maxim is the maxim of relevance. Simply, this maxim implies be relevant, which requires the speaker to be relevant to the topic of conversation or the context in which the utterance occurs, and also to the previous utterance during the conversation. So it's all about to be relevant, that's it. And maxim of manner, the 4th one, which is the last maxim. This maxim is related to how what is said is to be said. It requires the speaker to be clear and orderly when conversing in order to avoid ambiguity and obscurity. It consists of the super maxim, be perspicuous, and other 4 sub-maxims. Avoid obscurity of expression, avoid ambiguity, and be brief, and last, be orderly. So that's all about the Grice's maxims. Now we move to another issue. We come to discuss a very important concept which is laid by Grice. It is considered to be Grice's basic contribution in pragmatics. It's the concept of implicature. And implicature is something that the speaker suggests or implies with an utterance, even though it is not literally expressed. In fact, many aspects of meaning is conveyed, implied, or suggested by speakers without expressing them directly. Doing so leads to creating of a phenomena called implicature. So, simply implicature refers to what is implicit in speech. Grice distinguishes between 2 levels of meaning in language. The first level refers to what is said, and the second level is what is meant. This distinction leads to the foundation of the important aspect of implicature. Moreover, Grice makes a distinction between 2 different kinds of implicature: conventional and conversational. The conventional implicature is derived from the conventional features of the words employed in an utterance and reveals an implicit meaning, which can be generally or conventionally accepted by all people. So it's about the conventional meaning of words. While the second, which is the conversational implicature, is derived from a general principle of conversation and member of maxim which the speaker will normally obey. Conversational implicature reveals an implicit meaning which is only assured by participants involved in the speech event. That's closely related to its context. The main concern of Grice, in fact, was the conversational implicature. Now, as I said before, there are certain rules the speaker that should follow in their conversations. However, people are not observing these maxims or rules all the time. The failure of observing a maxim leads to what's called non-observance of a maxim, or breaking a maxim. According to Grice, there are 5 ways of failing to observe the maxims. The first one is flouting the maxims. Now, a flout takes place when a speaker overtly chooses not to observe one or more maxims with the intention of generating an implicature. The speaker is not trying to mislead, deceive, or incorporate, but encouraging the listener to look for deeper meaning beyond the semantic level. That is to say, the speaker is not trying to deceive the hearer, but he is trying to making him like come with an inference by himself. The second one, which is violating the maxim, Grice defines the term violation as the unostentatious non-observance of a maxim. That is to say, a speaker that is violating a maxim is liable to mislead. Violating differs from flouting, of course, because in violating a maxim, the speaker intends to mislead the hearer. And you know, in pragmatics, there is a heavy importance of intentions. So when the speaker intends to mislead the hearer, this is violating. The speaker, in this case, speaks the truth, implies something false. Just like saying I'm an engineer while I'm not an engineer. So I'm trying to deceive the hearer. The third one, or the third case of breaking or non-observing the maxims, is opting out of the maxims. Now, opting out of a maxim means showing an unwillingness to cooperate in the way that the maxim requires. Simply, the speaker is unwilling to cooperate and reveal more than he or she has. The fourth one, infringing the maxims. This type of non-observance of a maxim occurs when the speaker has failed to observe a maxim without the intention to generate an implicature or mislead the listener, unlike the violation or flouting. Such non-observance occurs from the speaker's imperfect linguistic performance in the language. Like, for example, foreign speakers or children who do not have full mastery of the language. For instance, if someone says, "We do not want no education," this is, as we all know, this is a double negation and it is grammatically incorrect. The last type, and finally, the last type of non-observance is called suspending. In contrast to other kinds of non-observance of maxims, suspending a maxim is based on cultural and social norms. However, it rarely occurs. For instance, in Indian culture, mentioning a latest person's name might evoke evil spirits and bring bad luck. So simply they ignore or they try not to mention a latest person's name in order not to evoke evil spirits. This is what they believe in according to their culture. So I have explained the 5 ways or cases of non-observing or breaking the maxims of Grice. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that the above mentioned points are of benefit to you. Thank you very much, Ms. Dunya. Thank you, everyone. I'm ready for questions at the end of the session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ibat, for enriching our knowledge about Grice's magazines. Now we have Pragmatics and Onomatopoeia, a portrayal to young audience, presented by lecturer Dr. Huda Halawaji, who has an MA in 1999 and a PhD in the year 2008. She has participated in several international conferences in Jordan, Georgia, France, England, Denmark, the United States of America, Germany, and Turkey. Her interests include discourse analysis, critical discourse, pragmatics, children literature, semiotics, and ecolinguistics. Go ahead, Dr. Huda. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be with you today to present a linguistic phenomenon. The first time I've heard about, or I heard about when I was an MA student, that was years back. My presentation is titled Onomatopoeia, a portal to young audience. But my onomatopoeia today is completely different from that when I was an MA student. Actually, I may start with something different. I'm not going to present an introduction or definition or whatsoever. I may start with the stimuli behind presenting this lecture. It was my lovely 4-year toddler in the family, actually, who attracted my attention to onomatopoeia in her own world. She's fond of having or eating a crispy or crunchy food. So once she likes to have a piece of bread, for example, she may say, I want cut, cut, cut. So this cut, cut refers to onomatopoeia in her world. Now, we call these words sound words or imitating words. She's not saying this for the sake of producing or for the sake of the production of sounds themselves. Rather, she describes the sounds she hears when she has her piece of crunchy or crispy food. Possibly enough, I mean, the audience over here may think about or actually notice a number of evidences or a number of examples and instances in the communication of their kids, toddlers, or whatsoever. The major function of these sound words is to communicate. She wants to say, I want this crunchy piece of food or a bread, actually. Now, I noticed this a long time ago. It's not something new for me, but the session today actually gives me a chance to spell out some thoughts. I'm not going to read literature or quote some people, though there are some indications about some attempts in the literature. What I want to say over here today is that we should think about working on interdisciplinary works, whether in our dissertations, theses, projects, papers, or whatsoever. It's not a matter of thinking about an area, any linguistic area, an ex-linguistic area in particular or separately, but we should think about making a match or mapping between two different areas as far as linguistics is concerned in the first place. Now, the question, the major question I had at the time of noticing this phenomenon, these sound words, is what's the significance of representing the sounds in words on the part of toddlers? Now, let me move to explaining or giving some remarks about onomatopoeia, which is, that most of the terms in semantics and the pragmatics in our linguistic sphere is derived or borrowed from ancient Greek. So this term is not different from other terms. It is etymologically borrowed from ancient Greek. Now, if we trace back the phenomenon itself, we can go back far to the primitive time, the primitive life of man. I mean, sound words or onomatopoeia was used by human to communicate. And you know that that's a primitive life. I mean, man or human at that primitive life is surrounded by, nature and the sounds of nature. So he is imitating, or the man at that time imitating sounds of nature to communicate. What's interesting to know about onomatopoeia nowadays, which functions as a means of communication, is an example, a village in Turkey. I remember that 2 years back, maybe, I was watching the channel, one of the channels, Abu Dhabi Geography or something like this. There was a program about a Turkish village. It is called Kashkoy, if I'm not mistaken in my pronunciation, Turkish pronunciation. It is situated close to the Black Sea. People there are farmers, and they communicate by whistling through high-pitched whistles and melodies. I mean, the number of the civilians at that spot, maybe 10,000 speakers in that village communicate in this way at different levels of age, surely. Now, if we think about Arabic, the phenomenon is there in Arabic. I'm not sure if some people who are specialists in Arabic are attending the session with us. In Arabic, it is called al-muhakat or al-musaqaba. For example, صرير الباب, فحيح الأفعى, خرير النهر, القشعريرة. يعني, in Arabic, there is just like English, any other language, it's there. I mean, people may use sound words to represent as representative of objects, not only human, but objects, all objects in the surrounding world. Now, how can we define the term onomatopoeia? Here we have certain synonyms for the term. We have sound symbolism, number one. Number two, imitating expressions. And number three, sound words. Now, let me start with a very old definition given by, which was given by Jesperson as the most well-recognized, one of the most well-recognized pioneers and authorities in this area. He defines the term onomatopoeia as follows. It's the connection between the sound of the word and its meaning. Words like bubble or crack show a connection between the sound of the word and the meaning of the word, since the sound of the word imitates the phenomenon people are describing. This is 1920. Now, the phenomenon itself, I mean, the sound words, the onomatopoeia, the phenomenon itself is influenced by culture. Since language is part or one item of culture, any culture, so each language has its own characteristics. If we take a simple example, I'm thinking about Mosili dialect and English, for instance. We have the sound of a gun. The sound of a gun may be represented by bang, whereas in Arabic, for example, it's taq in our Mosili dialect. Now let us go further to the significance of onomatopoeia in other disciplines, which is the main core, one of the main cores actually of my presentation. Now, once I started surfing the net, I could come up with some interdisciplinary studies which tackle onomatopoeia in different fields, not only as a matter of matching or mapping between sounds and meaning. I have actually 3 studies which attracted my attention. The first one, let me read you something where, some short lines taken from Markovich 2015, which is again another up-to-date work. The writer or the author says the following: today it can be considered, it's referring to onomatopoeia, can be considered as a very important component of the second language acquisition. So the first field that onomatopoeia can be dealt with is language teaching learning on the part of kids or toddlers. On the webpage of the Yale University, a very interesting example of the means of incorporating onomatopoeia to children's language learning is there. Actually, there is a piece of evidence taken from Yale University in America, where there is a study about the application of onomatopoeia in teaching kids a second language. Now, the second field I'm interested in, actually, and I've started with my dear friend Mrs. Dunya maybe months back, is that children's literature. It's a very interesting area to work on. I don't know why this area is accumulated. By the way, onomatopoeia in children's literature is regarded as one type of, or one class of figures of speech. You can find this phenomenon very clearly in nursery rhymes and poetry, which also these sound words are not given just for joy and fun, but actually again for teaching students and convey certain messages to the kids themselves. The third and the last field is about teaching children how to match or how to map between words and worlds when they are present in the environment, and how can they adopt certain clues or cues as gestures or onomatopoeia to understand or to map between the words and the surrounding world. This is actually given in a study. I have no date for the study. Vilko et al., who attempt to make sure or investigate that these clues, these gestures, onomatopoeia, and other clues are very necessary in caregivers' children communication. So what we have over here is the term communication, which has much to do with pragmatics. Now we come to pragmatics and my audience, my young audience or youngsters. There is a very interesting, up-to-date study. It's an article actually which attracted my attention to a great extent, and let me think for a while about the way people work on their studies and researches abroad. Here we have two Russian authors who have an article titled "Pragmatic Potential of Onomatopoeia in Movies for Children." Look at what we have over here. We have animated movies, children, and the pragmatics. So how could they match between these three things together in one study? These two people, the two authors' names are Lokainova and Koskova. They are Russian people. They actually investigated or included more than 100 movies in their study, and they have come up, or actually they came up with certain results very interesting to know. about using the onomatopoeia and the effect or the perlocution effect or force of these sound words on the part of the kids while watching the animated movies. I summarize some of these are their results actually in terms of the following points. Number one, these sound words act as strong expressive components. They reflect the level of speech development. They convey emotions. They describe nature. They attract child's attention to the most important character or event in the movie. They enhance their pun and parody in participating in a sort of wordplay. They develop mental activity, linguistic intuition, and social communicative skills. What's important is the social communicative skills. Actually, the pragmatics or the perlocution force using these clues or sound words with respect or take into consideration the kids themselves as the participants in the study actually is very promising for me. How could we make these clues actually act in the pragmatic umbrella? I'm thinking about their ways of expressing or conveying emotions. This is part of pragmatics again. I'm thinking about attracting the child's attention to the most important characters or event. What is there about certain characters? How do these characters or an X character speak, communicate? How does this character show his sadness, his soreness? Here we are talking about speech acts, informing a fact, stating a fact, and whatsoever. Now I would like to end my presentation with some questions. Then I may end with one important recommendation. Now, as the title suggests, as my title of the presentation suggests, let me say, confining myself with those little angels. I mean, the young people. This is why I'm thinking about raising questions with regard to them. Here we have some points rather than questions. I believe that children's literature is an undersearched area in Iraq. So why don't we motivate such studies with respect to speech act theory or any aspect of pragmatics? As far as teaching learning process, we need to think about our the future generation. I mean, the kids and the toddlers. How do we make use of these clues? I mean, sound words, onomatopoeia, in their textbooks, or if there are some clues like these in their textbooks, how do the teachers make use of them in teaching communication or skills in communication for kids? Communication in early childhood at different levels, again, is an under-resourced area. So we should think about these areas with respect to the children. Sorry. Now I have some other open questions. These questions have much to do with the part of the welcoming or opening speech presented by my friend Mrs. Dunya. It's the word interdisciplinary. So the first open question is, could we think about onomatopoeia as a new tool to use in speech act theory studies? 2, if so, is it likely to investigate doctor-patient conversation where sound words the patient uses to describe their pain perform a variety of speech acts? I'm thinking about informing, confirming, stating, etc. I'm thinking about my culture, our culture over here, or let me say it's subculture, Musli culture. Doctors may ask their patients about, for example, if they have a problem, chest pain, a problem, or whatsoever, what's the sound of your cough or something. Also, I'm thinking about old people. How can they diagnose? How the doctors actually, in their communication, could diagnose the sort of illness in his chest or whatsoever. Again, we have sounds. Mothers, most of that the kids or the babies cannot say anything, or cannot tell his doctor what's wrong with him or her. So the mother actually make a sort of portrait about his baby or his kid or whatever, making use of these sounds. And even the doctors, I noticed that some doctors use these sound words to ask the patient some questions in order to come up with an accurate diagnosis, and then the giving them the prescribed the drug. One last point is the last recommendation, or it's a recommendation. I have one recommendation actually. I'm thinking about a future plan to work on, or to work as actually teamworks. What I mean by teamworks is that we can think about working on papers, projects. I mean, as linguists, with some physicians, some physiologists, psychologists, psychiatric, and I'm planning to do so as far as the points raised over here today, thinking about the pragmatics, onomatopoeia, the doctor-patient conversation. How could we make use of these sound words to come up with the correct diagnosis? What sort of sound words the doctor or doctors make use in their diagnosis and whatsoever. Thank you very much for being patient with me, and I hope that I didn't take that much time to give or present my thoughts today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Huda, for this insightful view and how you managed to find a link between onomatopoeia and pragmatics. Last but not least, forensic pragmatics, pragmatics in criminal evidence, presented by our head of department, Professor Dr. Bassem Yahya Jassim al-Jabouri, who holds a PhD in applied linguistics and a BA in law. He has attended several international conferences on applied linguistics in Poland, Siberia, Italy, Russia, Malta, Greece, and the United States of America. His major interests are in forensic linguistics, legal translation, and foreign language teaching. Go ahead, Dr. Bassem, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dunya. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending our symposium. My contribution will be forensic pragmatics, the contribution of pragmatics to criminal evidence. Now, let me start with the definition of forensic pragmatics. Forensic pragmatics is a subfield of forensic linguistics. Forensic linguistics is basically concerned with the application of linguistic analysis, the application of findings, the application of research findings to the analysis of the language, which is commonly used in law. Well, now, forensic pragmatics, it tries to apply pragmatic analysis in investigating language evidence in criminal cases. Forensic pragmatists are usually called upon in order to, number one, to interpret indirect speech. Now, that's to say, when words do not mean what they say. In certain cases, especially in criminal cases, certain words do not mean what they say. They may mean something which is completely different from what they conventionally mean. They may mean opposite. They may mean different. So the job of the pragmatist is to identify the exact meaning of the words in a specific context. The pragmatist is also called upon in order to provide insights into semantic indeterminacy. What does this mean? As I said, sometimes a word is interpreted differently by different people. And the job of the pragmatist here is to identify the exact meaning of the word or words in a specific context. Well, the aim of this contribution is to show how pragmatics is relevant in criminal cases, especially in language crimes, and how it can be applied in analyzing a criminal evidence. To begin with, let us consider the following examples from Arabic. The first example or the first communicative event is شخص يتحدث مع معاون طبي. الحجية بها سرطان، كان أكل نص جسمها، كان أكل نص جسمه ونخله ومنتهي، وتريد تخلص من هالوجع وترتاح وتقول اللي خلصني من الوجع وارتاح أعطينه $1,000,000 وأنا تعرف ما عندي قلب وما حد يحل غيرك. هل هذه شكوى أم تحريض على جريمة؟ Is it a complaint or an incitement? Well, analyzing this episode appropriately, we have to appeal to pragmatics. Why? Because the pragmatics studies language in context. Well, pragmatics is basically concerned with language use, what the speaker means in a given situation and how his message is understood. For me, I understand the pragmatics as the study of meaning in interaction. So meaning, the meaning of a certain word, a certain utterance, a certain expression can be identified with reference to context clues. So here we have to refer to pragmatics in order to understand the exact meaning of this contribution, of this episode exactly, in order to determine whether this is an incitement or just a complaint. Now, this episode involves speech acts or a speech act. This speech act has elocutionary and predictionary forces. The elocutionary force here is to persuade the doctor assistant to commit a crime. So it is an incitement. But in order to be an incitement, the speaker must be rational. Number one, the speaker must be rational. إذن number one, the speech. No.
دكتور باسم راحت الشاشة.
Yes.
Okay.
Now. Okay.
No, I still can't see it. No, I can see you, but not the screen.
Yes. Well, okay. So, in order, so this contribution, in fact, involves a speech act. It also involves indirectness and we have indirectness, and the words can have double interpretation. Number three, this episode involves conversational implicature. It also involves a presupposition. How? Number one, it is an indirect speech act. In what sense? In the sense that the speaker have used the utterances in order to persuade or to complain, okay, let us say to persuade the doctor assistant to do something for him at least. It is indirect. He doesn't tell him what to do, but he presupposes that the doctor assistant knows what the speaker wants him to do. Okay, so it is also conversational implicature. There is a sort of, let us say, a relationship between what is said and what is meant. And if we analyze this by, for example, by looking for money, أعطيك وتقول مليون دينار ريحني. Now, this, he indirectly asks the doctor assistant to give her a drug in order to kill her and relieve her from suffering. So in this case, the context is important. The way the utterance is expressed is important. The background knowledge each interactant has determined whether it is legally implicated as incitement or not. But as I said, in order to be incitement, the following velocity conditions are required. Number one, the speaker must have malicious intent. Number one. Number two, he must be rational. It means not insane, serious, not sarcastic, adult, not young. Now, but the problem in which the pragmatist is called upon to solve is how can malicious intent be proved? The job of the pragmatist here is to use context clues in order to confirm or disconfirm the allegation that the speaker has a bad intent. Let us now move to the third example. The third example. في مقابلة تلفزيونية سؤال: وماذا عن مدير الشركة؟ مدير الشركة ومدير الشركة ايده حيل نظيفة الله يسلمه، وما يمد ايده على الحرام ابد ابد، بس حوت وما يتعامل الا بالدفتر ابو المية. Well, is it a praise or a defamation؟ هل هذا مديح ام تشهير؟ Well, legally, defamation is defined as a false statement that lowers or distorts someone's reputation or the social image in front of the people of his community. Now, such a statement is an indirect speech act in that it takes the form of praise, but in fact it is a defamation. So the speaker says something and means something else. How can this be? How can this interpretation be arrived at? By using context clues, by using how the speech is introduced, how the utterance is said, in addition to certain words. For example, أبد حيل نظيفي، إيده حيل نظيفي وما يمد إيده على الحرام أبد بس حوت. So there is a contrast here. وما يتعامل إلا بدفتر أبو المية، احنا بالدفاتر. So here, this contrast and this emphasis on أبد وحيل indicate that the speaker says something and means something else. But legally, in order for such a speech to be defamatory, there must be some conditions, or let us call them felicity conditions. Number one, the speaker must be rational, means not serious, rational, not insane, serious, not sarcastic, adult, not a child. The statement must be publicly disseminated, and this is a very important point. Otherwise, it will be regarded as a libel or slander. So every defamation must be publicly disseminated, and there must be a sort of malice. Now, and the speaker must have a bad intention. Now, in order to prove the last 2 points, in order to prove these 2 points, that a pragmatist or a linguist is called upon in order to show without any doubt that the speaker says something and means something else, that this is a defamation. This defamation is or must be represented by what has been said, and what has been said should be analyzed in a way that should show undeniably, without any, let us say, very clearly, that it reflects the bad intent or the malicious intent. Again, the contribution of the pragmatist is important, using the words used and the context clues. Well, let us now move to the fourth example. مواطن يراجع دائرة المرور، الضابط رقم الشاصي ما مطابق، ناقص رقم، ولازم تروح لبغداد تجيب صورة قيد. زين بعد فترة قصيرة زين ما بيها مجال، يرحمه لأبوك ما بيها مجال، الله يخليك ليش ودين لبغداد وش هذا، ما بيها مجال. تريد العدل، الشغلة تحتاج شروخ حتى تمشي. المراجعة افتهم، دعجنها والخمرة موجودة، دعجنها والخمرة موجودة. طالما هالشكل انطيني البطاقة الحمراء قبل كل شيء. هل هذا الحديث طلب رشوة أم مساعدة بريئة؟ أوكي؟ طلعني. This episode involves a background, negotiation, requesting a bribe, and accepting the offer. Let us analyze this episode pragmatically. The background رقم الشاصي ناقص رقم وانت لازم تروح لبغداد etc. It is background. زين ما بيها مجال. This is negotiation. This negotiation usually precedes a bribery situation. Now, the official, okay, understands what is meant by ما بيها مجال. He said تحتاج شروخ حتى تمشي. This is an indirect way of requesting a bribe. And the interactant understands what the public official means. So what did he answer him? دعجنها والخمرة موجودة. This is a metaphor. It means مشيها وأشديد احنا حاضرين. But he uses an indirect speech. He uses a metaphor. اعطيني البطاقة الحمراء. You know that البطاقة الحمراء ساقطة. البطاقة الخضراء ما السكن. البطاقة الحمراء is an indirect way, as an indirect request of an offer. معناها اعطيني 25,000 دينار. So in order for a speech act of a bribery to be accomplished, the offeree must be a public official having a specific power. Number two, both the parties know that they are doing an illegal act. And this is a very important point also. This is one of the felicity conditions. And both parties intend to accomplish the deal to the end, although they know that the deal is illegal. These are some of the applications of pragmatic analysis to criminal cases, especially language crimes. Owing to the pressure of time, I suffice with these examples, and in conclusion, the discussion above clearly shows how pragmatics is relevant to criminal cases and how it can provide deep insights into how a criminal evidence can be linguistically evaluated so as to confirm or disconfirm an accusation. Thank you for attentive listening, and the questions and comments will be highly appreciated. Thank you very much again.
Well, thank you, dear Doctor, for the useful points that enrich our knowledge in forensic linguistics and how you linked it with speech acts. Before we start with the questions, let me say that at the end of this symposium, a number of conclusions can be drawn and suggestions can be made. Number one, the contributors have emphasized the fact that pragmatics has no longer been viewed as a separate level of linguistic analysis or a discipline that can be studied on its own with reference to other disciplines. Number 2, pragmatics is now viewed not only interdisciplinary, but also multidisciplinary. Number 3, pragmatics not only has wider implication, but also has wider applications in law, semiotics, discourse analysis, psychology, translation studies, medicine, and ecology. This is simply because pragmatics studies language in use and accounts for meaning in interaction. Drawing on the conclusions above, it is recommended that theses and dissertations, which account for pragmatic analysis of text, written or spoken, literary, journalistic, religious, or scientific, should account for these multi-dimensions in order for the analysis to be acceptable, convincing, and realistic. Well, now before we end the session, I would like to ask the audience if you have any questions. I think the first person who sent me a question was Dr. Ashraf. Dr. Ashraf, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you're perfectly clear.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate everybody and thank everybody for a quite unique set of presentations. You've all dealt with truly current trends in pragmatics. You've done us all proud. You've done the department proud and the college proud and the university proud, I'm sure. Just a couple of comments, actually, more than they are questions. One, for Dr. Marwan, I really liked the third view with regards to pragmatics and the interdisciplinary approach to pragmatics, where we have a connection between pragmatics and other disciplines such as socio-pragmatic or syntactic or pragmatic or morpho-pragmatic disciplines, etc., etc. I agree with you that people have been doing it. I've done it myself. I have 3 chapters, 3 chapters and 3 or 4 such papers as well. But like I said, like you said, sorry, it hasn't been documented in research, and I think that you have a very good opportunity to write theoretical research and document that fact and name it for yourself. My other comment goes to my dear colleague, Dr. Huda. Not a comment, but rather an answer to her question, a question that you asked, which was to do with the opportunity of looking at onomatopoeia in doctor-patient interactions and seeing whether they are, well, investigating whether they can be seen as speech acts or not. So my answer to your question, Dr. Huda, is that we all know, you very well know, that a speech act is an act which is performed through the utterance of words. And you also know that there's a very big distinction between words with literal meaning and sounds. So when you look at the 2 levels of language, the sound level and the meaning level, the word is what sort of connects those 2 levels. So the words convey meanings. Onomatopoeic words are different. They don't convey meanings in the same way as other words do. So when you have a speech act, for example, like, I now pronounce you husband and wife, or let's say, I promise to come. It's through those words, through that utterance, through the utterance of those words that you're performing the speech act. But when you're saying so when a doctor is interacting with a patient and, let's say, pinches that patient on the shoulder and asks him, does it hurt here? And the patient in English may say, ouch. In Arabic may say, ah, or I. This isn't a speech act being performed through the utterance of the words ach, I, and ouch. This is the action itself. It's not a speech act, it's an act. But the act is, let's say, the act is the sound itself and not a word performing the sound. So be very careful when looking at onomatopoeia and speech acts. Once again, I'd like to congratulate everybody. I really enjoyed the presentations. I would have to apologize because I really wanted to be a part of those presentations as well and talk about corpus pragmatics, but my current situation doesn't allow me, I'm afraid. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ashraf.
Yeah, can I answer?
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, concerning the third view about pragmatics, I understood that you're asking me to write something in order to document this for myself, but I did this probably 22 or 23 years ago because I made a research paper in the 90s talking about the re phoneme in Moصل Arabic and how it changes to re. So many people are thinking of this problem. And at that time, I concluded that this can be achieved. I mean, understanding the case of changing the re into re by moving this phonological problem to pragmatics. So, and I made a research paper and I called it a phonopragmatic study. I just wanted to have also a comment on the conclusions or the recommendations that Ms. Dunya also read. I think the first one should be dropped because you are saying that the participants of this symposium conclude that pragmatics cannot work alone as a component. I disagree with this because I said this is one of the views of a pragmatic. So many people are still doing a pragmatic research, pragmatic research work proper. So it is just like saying, for example, if you want to combine forensic linguistics with applied linguistics, so you can make a new science, but you are going to drop applied linguistics. You are not going to make applied linguistics proper. So this is, I think, something which cannot be applied because there are so many people who are doing a pragmatic work proper, and it has nothing to do with other components. So pragmatics as one component can be studied, and we said we have 3 views. This is the first view, actually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll drop number 1. Anyone else has a question? I think Mr. Amin wrote me that he has the question. Mr.
Good evening.
Amin? Good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Dunya, and thank you everybody for these rich presentations. My question is to my dear professor, Dr. Bassem. Hello, Dr. Bassem.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you, Doctor, for this interesting lecture. My question is, how can phonology contribute to pragmatics in order to reach a better and clearer understanding of the episodes that you presented, particularly the first and the third one? I mean, phonology plays an important role, especially as far as intonation is concerned in the understanding of such utterances. Thank you.
Well, may I answer? May I answer?
Go ahead, Doctor.
Yes. You know that phonology is basically concerned with the study of the sound system of a given language. I think that it is not phonology as a system, but how words are emphasized, how words are, let us say, said sarcastically or in a given way. The way words are pronounced is what matters, whether it is sarcastic or serious. So when I say abad, here, this is not phonology. This is here we have an emphasis on certain words, not and on how these words are pronounced. So probably articulatory phonology might be relevant here rather than acoustic or auditory. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, I think Mr. Qutayba has a question also.
Yes, please, Ms. Dunya. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Mr. Qutayba.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, I want to just ask Dr. Marwan. We have, as we know, for pragmatics, we have under types of pragmatics, we have speech acts, we have rhetorical structure, we have conversational implicature, we have management of reference in discourse. Is it possible for Dr. Marwan is just to make it clear what is meant by rhetorical structure? This is number one. The other question is it possible, or how is it possible to apply pragmatics as I'm talking about literary figures? Is it possible, or how far we can apply pragmatics in literature? Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Qutayba. Adam, is concerning your first question, the rhetorical structure is very much similar to information structure, which is found in linguistics, probably covered by so many theories of linguistics in grammar and in pragmatics. In information structure, you try to see the given and the new information, where in English, for example, always the given information is put at the beginning and the new information is put at the end. This is related to rhetorical structure of pragmatics. Concerning applying pragmatics to literature, in fact, nowadays there is a theory which is called literary pragmatic theory, which tries to apply all the pragmatics knowledge in literature. I will give you just one example about this theory. For example, you know, in novels, for example, in novel writing, sometimes, quite usually, we have the writer only and the reader, but sometimes we have the narrator, which is a third party. Now, this narrator is a mediator between the writer and the reader, but usually it is, you know, it is played by the writer himself, you see. So it is, in fact, the writer is doing two jobs, two roles, as a speaker and as a narrator, and a writer and a narrator, and the in front of the hero, which is one job. Now, the play that or the game that the writer is doing by, you know, changing himself sometimes from being a writer into being a narrator is the goal of so many pragmatic studies nowadays, and they are calling him a mediator, because it is exactly like in conversational interaction nowadays. You can tell somebody in front of him, I mean, saying something, give him the message by yourself as a speaker, you know, speaker here interaction, the normal one, or you send him a message by somebody. So you tell, for example, somebody to say, tell Ahmed that I'm going to, this is a mediator also. Now, people are trying to link this between literature and conversational interaction. Yes, in literature, we can apply pragmatics, and it is a very, you know, rich area in which pragmatics can play.
This is why I'm asking this question. Thank you very much.
By the way, I tried this in one of my research papers, and I tried this also in my PhD work, because I chose a novel in order to get examples from my pragmatic goals.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Marwan. Thank you very much.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question? I just want to say, is Ms. Huda here, Dr. Huda here? Because Dr. Ashraf asked her a question or had a comment and she didn't answer. Is Dr. Huda here? Well, I guess she's not. I'm sure it's about technical problems.
Dunya, if there is if there is no one, can I have one last comment or question, please?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Dr. Bassem, please. I think for your most of your examples, we can go back. If we go back to the definition of pragmatics, simply pragmatics is defined as a subfield of linguistics and semiotic that studies how context contributes to meaning. So we have, what do we have here? We have context and we have meaning, right? Or
you are right. You are right. The job of the linguist is to identify the contextual clues that serve his purpose. You see, the contextual clue may be words or expressions used.
Yes.
The contextual clue may be the way words are pronounced or used. The contextual clue may be conversational implicature. That's to say the relationship between what is said and between the question and the answer and the background knowledge.
This is what Dr. Iba talked about. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bassem. Thank you very much for all the.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question? Anyone else has a question, please? I don't think anyone has a question. Okay, well, that wraps everything for today. Thanks for the teachers who have participated, Dr. Bassem, Dr. Marwan, Dr. Iba, and Dr. Huda. And thanks for the audience for coming, and thanks for those who have given the question. This is your moderator, Dunya Al Hussein, live in Erbil, wishing you all a good night.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dunya.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Dunya.
Welcome.
Good night.
I hope I did well.
Yes, you
Thank
did.
you.